Let me tell you something about empty places. People think empty means nothing's there. They're wrong. Empty places are the loudest places in the galaxy if you know how to listen. The wind talks, the metal groans, and sometimes when you've worked one long enough, you start to feel like the place is waiting for something, holding its breath. That's how it was at Hollow Reach. I was 19 when I came to work there, barely shaving, skinny as a fuel line. I told everybody I was 22 so they'd give me the loader's job, and nobody checked because nobody cared. That's the kind of place it was. The edge of nowhere. A dead port on a dying moon, parked out past the third trade ring where the freighters only stopped if their engines were coughing. And the old man ran it alone. His name was Tavin Marsh. I want you to picture him, because this whole story is really about him, even though I'm the one who lived to tell it. He was maybe 60, maybe 70. You couldn't tell with Tavin. His face was all weather and scar tissue, brown and cracked like the moon itself. He had hands that looked like they'd been broken and reset about 40 times. He walked slow. He talked slower. And he had this way of looking at you, real steady, like he was reading something written on the inside of your skull. The first thing he ever said to me was, "Don't touch the green levers." That was it. No hello, no what's your name, just don't touch the green levers. I didn't touch the green levers. So here's the setup, and I'll keep it simple because the truth is most of life out there was simple. Hard, but simple. Hollow Reach was a starport built about 200 years before I showed up. Back then it had been something, a real waypoint. Ships from 40 systems used to dock there, big haulers and passenger liners and the long, ugly mining barges that smelled like burnt copper for a week after they left. There were bars. There were markets. There were people, thousands of them, all rushing around under those huge curved ceilings. Then the trade lanes shifted. Some council somewhere drew a new line on a map, and just like that, Hollow Reach wasn't on the way to anywhere anymore. So it died, slow like most things die. The people left. The bars closed. The lights went out one wing at a time until there was just the old man and a maintenance budget so small it was basically a joke. But here's the thing you have to understand. Tavin kept it alive. Not busy, not profitable, alive. He kept the landing lights working. He kept the docking clamps greased. He kept the air scrubbers humming in the 3 sectors that still held pressure. Every single morning, before the sun crawled up over the ridge, he'd walk the main concourse with a flashlight and a clipboard, checking things that hadn't needed checking in 50 years. I asked him about it once. Early on, I said, "Tavin, why do you bother? Nobody's coming." He didn't even look up from the gauge he was reading. He just said, "A port's a promise, kid. You keep the lights on so anybody lost out there knows there's still somewhere to land." I thought that was the saddest, dumbest thing I'd ever heard. I don't think that anymore. Let me set the scene for you proper, because the atmosphere of that place is half the story. The moon was called Ophir 4, but nobody used the full name. We just called it the Rock. It had a thin, mean little atmosphere that could kill you if you stayed out in it too long without a mask, but you could breathe it for a few minutes if you had to. The sky was the color of an old bruise, purple and gray and yellow round the edges. The sun was small and far and white, and it threw these long, hard shadows that made everything look like it was leaning over to whisper to you. The wind never stopped. Never. It came off the dust flats in long, low howls, and at night it would find every crack in that old station and make this sound, this high, lonely, singing sound. The first week I was there I couldn't sleep for it. I kept thinking somebody was crying in the walls. Tavin slept like a stone through all of it. The station itself was huge, mostly dark. We lived and worked in maybe a tenth of it. The rest was sealed off, cold, no air, just these endless corridors full of dust and silence and old broken-down things. Sometimes I'd shine my light down one of those dead hallways and the beam would just disappear, eaten up by the black. Like the dark out there was thicker than dark should be. I hated those corridors. Tavin walked them like they were his front garden. The sounds I remember most. The wind, like I said. The deep hum of the scrubbers. The drip of condensation somewhere you could never find. The clank of Tavin's boots on the grating. And every few weeks, if we were lucky, the roar of a freighter coming in to fuel up, a sound so big and so rare it'd make my whole chest shake, and I'd run to the window like a little kid to watch the lights come down out of that bruised sky. That was our whole life. The old man, the boy, the wind, and the waiting. Until the night everything changed. It started with a glitch. I was in the control room, though calling it a control room was generous. It was a room with controls, most of which didn't work. I was supposed to be watching the long-range scope, which mostly meant watching a green line draw itself across a dark screen, over and over, finding nothing. It was the dead middle of the night cycle. Tavin was asleep. I was bored out of my skull, eating cold protein paste straight from the tube when the scope blinked. Just once. A little flicker way out at the edge of range, then gone. I sat up. Sensor ghosts weren't unusual out there, old debris, ice, solar junk. But this one had been bright and clean and too symmetrical to be a rock. I waited. The green line swept around again. Nothing. I told myself it was nothing. I went back to my paste, and the scope blinked again, closer this time, and not alone. There were two of them now, 3, 5. I dropped the tube. By the time the scope had made its next sweep, there were 11 contacts, all moving in a tight formation, all coming straight at us, and all of them dark. No transponders, no comms, no running lights. In my whole life, I'd never seen a ship come in dark. You don't do that. It's like walking into somebody's house at night without knocking. The only reason to come in dark is if you don't want to be seen, or if you don't care whether you're allowed. I ran for Tavin's room. I want to tell you I was brave about it. I wasn't. I was 19 and terrified, and I burst into that old man's quarters, yelling like the building was on fire. He woke up slow. That always drove me crazy about him. The whole world could be ending, and Tavin would sit up, rub his face, find his boots, and put them on one at a time before he'd so much as ask what was wrong. He did exactly that now. Ships, I was saying. Tavin, there's ships, a hole, there's 11 of them, they're coming in dark, no comms, nothing. How far? 20 minutes, maybe less. He stood up. He was quiet for a second. Then he said something I'll never forget. He said, well, somebody got lost after all. And he smiled just a little, like an old man who'd kept a porch light on for 50 years and finally heard a knock at the door. He had no idea. None of us did. We went to the control room together. Tavin moved faster than I'd ever seen him move, which still wasn't fast, but for him it was practically a sprint. He leaned over the scope. He watched one sweep, two. His face didn't change, but I saw something go quiet behind his eyes, something careful. That's not a freighter formation, he said. What is it? Military. He tapped the screen where the 11 dots held their tight wedge. Civilian ships sprawl out, they drift, they don't care that, he tapped again, that's discipline. Somebody's flying those in a pattern, a box, a defensive box. Whose? He didn't answer. He was already keying the comm panel, the real one, the long-range array that we almost never used because there was almost never anybody to talk to. He opened a hail, wide-band, calm voice. Unidentified formation, this is Hollow Reach Port Authority. You are entering controlled approach space. Please transmit identification and intent. Repeat, this is Hollow Reach. Identify and state your intent. Static. He said it again and again. On the fourth try, the speaker crackled. And a voice came through. I'd heard a lot of alien languages by then. Out at the Reach you got used to the clicks and the warbles and the deep gut sounds, even if you couldn't understand a word. But this voice wasn't any of those. It was smooth. Cold. It came out in perfect trade standard with this flat, polished tone, like every word had been measured before it was spoken. It said, "Hollow Reach. Your designation is acknowledged. It is also irrelevant. This facility has been reassigned. You will power down your defensive systems and vacate the structure. You have 1 hour." Tavin and I looked at each other. He keyed the comm again. Reassigned by whom? On whose authority? This is sovereign human territory under the Frontier Compact. You've got no claim here. There was a pause, and then the voice said something that made my skin crawl. It said, "The compact does not extend this far, caretaker. Nothing extends this far. That is why we have come. You have 1 hour. We suggest you do not waste it." Then the channel closed. And I remember standing there in that dead old control room, with the wind singing in the walls, looking at 11 dark ships growing on the scope, and thinking, for the very first time in my dumb young life, that I might actually die out here. Tavin sat down in the old captain's chair. Slow, he folded his hands. "Okay," he said, mostly to himself. "Okay. Tavin, what do we do? First, we don't panic." "I'm panicking." "I can see that, stop it." He said it gentle though, not mean. He had this voice he'd use, low and even, that pulled you back down to the ground without you even noticing it happening. "Sit. Breathe. Tell me what you saw on the scope. Everything." So I told him, the flicker, the 11 contacts, the dark approach, the box formation. He nodded along, asking little questions, and the whole time he was doing something with his hands, running them along the arm of that old chair, tracing the worn-down spots like a man finding his footing. When I was done, he was quiet a long time. Then he said, "You know what the scenarii are?" I shook my head. "No reason you would. They don't come out this way. They keep to the deep core near the old stars." He rubbed his jaw. "They're old, kid. Older than us, older than most of the people in the compact. And they've got an idea about themselves. They think the galaxy used to belong to them way back. Think all the rest of us are squatters living in their house. Every few generations they get a notion to come out and take some of it back. And you think that's them." That voice, he almost smiled. That smug, polished, "we've decided," and its final voice. Yeah, that's them. Nobody else talks like the universe is a thing they already own. "Then we should run." "Run where?" I didn't have an answer for that. There was nowhere to run. Hollow Reach had 2 working shuttles, both of them held together with prayer and spot welds. 0 for 4 was 3 weeks from the nearest inhabited world at full burn, and those 11 ships were coming down fast into the only port on the whole moon. We were a couple of caretakers on a dead rock at the edge of the map, and a galactic power had just told us to get out of the way. "So that's it," I said. "We just leave. Let them have it. It's just an empty port, right? It's not worth dying over." And Tavin looked at me, and he said the thing that I have carried in my chest every single day since. He said, "It's not the port, kid. It was never about the port." He got up. He started walking. I followed because what else was I going to do? He led me out of the control room, down the main concourse, under those huge dark curving ceilings, our 2 flashlights swinging little circles of light through all that empty space. The wind was loud that night, howling, and our footsteps echoed and echoed, 2 pairs of boots in a place built for thousands. "Let me ask you something," he said as we walked. "Why do you think they came here? Of all the rocks in all the dark, why this one?" "You said it, it's empty. Nobody's out here, easy to take." "That's part of it, but think bigger." He stopped at one of the tall windows and looked out at the dust flats, all silver and gray under the small white sun that never really set out here. "The scenarii are coming back, pushing out from the core. And when a power pushes out, it doesn't grab the cities first. It grabs the edges, the forgotten places, the ones nobody's watching. It plants a flag where nobody'll notice, and then another, and another. And by the time anybody looks up and sees what's happening," he spread his hands, "the edge of the map already belongs to somebody else." I felt cold. "This port's a test," he said. "We're a test. They want to see what happens when they push. They want to know, do these humans fold? Do they run? Do they hand over the keys and say sorry for the trouble?" He looked at me. "And whatever we do tonight, they'll write it down, and it'll tell them how hard the next push has to be, and the one after that. Tavin, we're two people. I know. We can't fight 11 warships. I know that too." He started walking again. "We're not going to fight them, kid. Fighting's not what humans are good at. Everybody thinks it is, but it's not. There's 100 species out there meaner than us, faster than us, with sharper teeth and harder shells." He turned a corner into the old administration wing toward a door I'd never seen him open. "No, what humans are good at, what we're better at than anybody in this whole black galaxy, is digging in, holding on, outlasting. Being the rock that the tide can't move, no matter how long it pushes." He stopped at the door. He pulled a key off the chain around his neck, an actual physical key which I hadn't seen in years. "You want to know why I keep the lights on?" he said. "You want to know why I walk these halls every morning checking gauges for ships that never come?" He put the key in the lock. "Because someday," he said, "somebody was going to come out of that dark sky and tell me this place wasn't mine, and I wanted to be ready to tell them they were wrong." He turned the key, and he opened the door. "I'm going to tell you what was behind that door, but first I have to tell you about the hour. Because that's the part that haunts me, not the ships, not what came later, the hour. The Senari had given us 1 hour to vacate. And Tavin, instead of running, instead of hiding, instead of begging for his life on the comm, Tavin spent that hour getting the port ready to receive guests. I mean that exactly the way it sounds. Behind that door was a small room, old, dusty, and it was full of records, real paper records in folders, in boxes, the kind of thing nobody had kept in 100 years. Logbooks, charters, treaties. And right in the middle, framed on the wall, was a document I couldn't read, old language, faded ink, with a heavy wax seal on the bottom. "What is all this?" I asked. "This," Tavin said, lifting the framed document off the wall real careful, "is the founding charter of Hollow Reach, signed 212 years ago, by 40 species, including," he tapped the seal, "the Compact, the Free Worlds, the Drennan Hegemony, and about 30 other powers, half of which don't even exist anymore. So this isn't just a human port, kid. This is a neutral port, chartered, protected. Every signatory swore to defend the neutrality of this place forever. It's old law, the oldest, older than the Compact's borders, older than any line on any map." He held it up to the light. "When the Senari say nothing extends this far, they're wrong. This extends this far. This piece of paper extends everywhere it was ever signed. But nobody enforces it anymore. You said yourself the place is dead. Who's going to come defend a charter for an empty port?" And Tavin smiled that little smile again. "Nobody," he said, "unless we ask them to." And he carried the charter down to the control room, and he set it on the desk, and he sat down at that long-range array, the one we never used, and he started to broadcast. He broadcast the charter, every word of it, on every band, to everyone. He read it out loud in his slow, steady voice. The whole thing, all the old language and the long lists of signatories, and he attached the original document's authentication codes, the ones embedded in that wax seal, codes that had been dead and sleeping in our systems for 2 centuries. And then, when he was done reading, he spoke plain. "This is Tavin Marsh, caretaker of Hollow Reach Neutral Port, chartered under the Concord of 40. An armed formation of the Senari Dominion has entered our space and demanded we abandon this facility under threat of force. This is a violation of the Concord. I am invoking the Mutual Defense Clause. To every signatory power, living or successor, your oath is called. I don't expect most of you to answer. I know what we are out here. I know we're forgotten. But the law isn't forgotten. The law doesn't forget. And I will be standing on this port when the Senari arrive with the lights on, because a port is a promise. Marsh out." He closed the channel. and the room was very quiet. "They're not going to answer," I said. "It's too far. It's 3 weeks at least. Even if anybody hears it, even if anybody cares, by the time they get here will be." "I know." "Then why?" He leaned back in the old chair. He looked very tired all of a sudden, very old. "Because the broadcast doesn't have to bring an army," he said. "It just has to be heard. The Senari are testing us, remember. They want to know what happens when they push a forgotten little human port at the edge of the dark. They expect us to fold. So when they come down here and find one old man and a kid who didn't fold, who instead reached back 200 years and pulled the whole galaxy's law down on their heads, on every band where everybody can hear it," he tapped his temple. "Now it's not a quiet little test anymore. Now it's a record. Now somebody in the core is going to ask the Senari, on the floor of some council, what exactly happened at Hollow Reach, and the Senari are going to have to answer for it." He looked at me. "We can't beat them, kid, but we can make them seen. We can drag what they're doing out into the light where they can't pretend it didn't happen. And sometimes that's the whole war right there. Not the fighting, the witnessing." I didn't fully understand it then. I do now. The hour ran down. I watched it on the old clock above the scope, the red numbers ticking away, while the 11 ships filled more and more of the screen. We could see them on the long-range cameras now, long, dark, smooth-hulled things, no straight lines on them anywhere, all these flowing curves like they'd been grown instead of built. Beautiful in a way that made my stomach turn. Like a knife is beautiful. Tavin made tea. "I want you to understand that. With 12 minutes left on the clock, with 11 warships of an ancient hostile power descending on us, the old man got up, went to the little burner in the back of the control room and made tea. 2 cups. He handed me one. My hands were shaking so bad I spilled half of it. 'Drink,' he said. 'It's good for the nerves.' How are you so calm?" He blew on his tea. He thought about it. "I'm not calm," he said. "I'm scared half to death, but I've been scared before. You learn after enough times that being scared and being useless are 2 different things. The fear's going to be there no matter what. Might as well do something while it is." The clock hit 0. For a second, nothing happened. Then the comm crackled, and that smooth, cold voice came back. "Your hour has expired, caretaker. You have not vacated. You have instead broadcast a great deal of noise across a great many channels." A pause. "Interesting. We did not expect you to be clever. We expected you to be afraid." "I'm both," Tavin said into the comm. "Turns out you can be both." There was a silence on the other end, a long one. Then the voice said, "We are landing. Do not interfere. We wish to meet the man who reads 200-year-old laws to an empty sky." And on the cameras, the lead ship broke from the formation, turned its smooth, dark nose toward our main landing pad, and began to descend through the bruised purple sky, slow and silent, like something out of a dream. Or a nightmare. I couldn't tell which yet. We went down to meet it. I'll never forget walking out onto that landing pad. The wind hit us like a wall, full of dust, screaming. We had our masks on, the cheap ones from the supply closet, and I could hear my own breath rasping inside mine, fast and ragged. The little white sun was low on the ridge. The shadows were a mile long. And the ship came down. It was bigger than I'd thought. Up close it blotted out half the sky. It settled onto the pad without a sound, no roar, no scream of engines, just this deep low pressure I felt in my teeth, and the dust blew out from under it in a ring, and then it was still. For a moment, nothing. Then a seam opened in the smooth dark hull. A ramp lowered. Light spilled out, a cold blue-white light, the color of the inside of a glacier. And they came down. The soldiers came first. I counted 12. They were tall, taller than a man, maybe 2.5 meters, and lean, and they moved with this awful liquid grace like water deciding to walk. They wore armor that flowed over them like the hull of the ship, dark and smooth and segmented. Each one carried a long weapon I didn't recognize, and their faces, what I could see of their faces behind those visors, were narrow and pale and still. Not cruel, worse than cruel, indifferent. The way you'd look at an ant on the sidewalk you hadn't decided yet whether to step on. They formed two lines along the bottom of the ramp, perfect, silent. And then he came down. I knew the second I saw him that this was the voice from the comm. He was taller than the soldiers, and where they were armored, he wore a long flowing robe, dark, edged in that same cold light. He had no weapon. He didn't need one. He moved like a man who had never once in his long life had to hurry. He came down the ramp. He stopped at the bottom. He looked at the two of us, one old man, one shaking boy in cheap masks on a dead pad in a screaming wind. And he smiled. "Caretaker Marsh," he said, "I am Adjutant Vosk Salinae of the Senari Dominion. I have come a long way to take this place from you." He spread his long arms, taking in the whole dead port, the dark windows, the silent halls. "Though I confess, now that I see it, I am not sure why we wanted it. It is a ruin, a tomb. You have spent your life keeping the lights on in a grave." Tavin pulled down his mask so the alien could see his face. The wind tore at his thin gray hair. "It's not a grave," he said. "A grave's where you bury the dead. This is a port. A port's where the lost come home." The adjutant tilted his head. "And who," he said softly, "do you imagine is coming home, old man? No one is coming. No one has come in 50 years. No one will ever come again." He took a step closer. "You are alone out here. You have always been alone. And now I am going to take even your loneliness from you." And Tavin Marsh, 60 or 70 years old, scarred, slow, 2.5 meters of armored death standing on every side of him. Tavin Marsh looked up at that ancient alien lord. And he said, "You're wrong. I'm not alone. I haven't been alone since the second you came through that door." The adjutant frowned. "Explain." "You came in dark," Tavin said. "No transponders, no comms. You thought nobody could see you. But I've been broadcasting on every band since the moment you crossed into my space. Your descent, your threat, your faces." He nodded toward the dark windows of the port behind us, and for the first time I noticed every camera, every sensor, every dead old eye of that station was lit, recording. "Everything you've done here in the last hour is already 3 light towers out and climbing, headed for the core. For the compact, for the conquered of 40, he smiled, and it was not a kind smile. "You wanted to take an empty port quietly, Adjutant, but you've just done it loud, in front of the whole galaxy, and there's no taking that back." The wind howled. And for the first time, the Adjutant Vosk Salinae of the Senari Dominion, ancient, powerful, certain, stopped smiling. The adjutant didn't say anything for a long moment. That was the scariest part. I'd expected anger, shouting maybe, some kind of threat. That's what people do when you back them into a corner. They get loud, they puff up. The adjutant got quiet. He stood there at the bottom of his ramp in that cold blue light, the wind whipping his dark robe around his long, thin frame, and he just looked at Tavin, studying him, like a man who'd found a stone in his garden that turned out to be the corner of something buried, something much bigger than the stone. Then he said very softly, "You are not afraid of me." "I told you," Tavin said, "I'm scared half to death." "No." The adjutant took a slow step forward. His soldiers didn't move, but I felt them watching, all 12 of them, those flat, indifferent visors swinging just slightly toward us. "You fear pain, you fear death. Those are animal fears. Every creature has them. But me, what I am, what I represent," he spread his long fingers, "you are not afraid of that. And that is very strange, because everyone is afraid of that. Everyone, everywhere I have ever gone, for longer than your species has had language." "Maybe you've been going to the wrong places," Tavin said. The adjutant tilted his head, and I swear this is true, he almost smiled again. Not a nice smile, but something like respect buried way down under the cold. "You are clever, caretaker. I said that already and I meant it. The broadcast was clever. You cannot fight me, so you reach back 2 centuries and pull dead law over yourself like a blanket, and you make sure the whole sky is watching when I tear it away." He nodded slowly. "It will cost me. You are right about that. There will be questions in the Corps. Some inconvenient council will demand to know what happened at the place called Hollow Reach." He looked around at the dark port, the long shadows, the dust. "But you have miscalculated one thing, old man. You believe that being seen will protect you, that the witnessing is a kind of shield." He took another step. He was close now, close enough that I could see his eyes behind the robe's deep hood, pale, almost colorless, with no whites at all. "It is not a shield," he said. "It is only a record, and a record requires someone left alive to read it the same way as the one who wrote it." He smiled fully now, and it was terrible. "I will simply write a different record. I will report that I arrived to find this facility abandoned and structurally unsound, that I attempted to make contact and received only an automated distress loop, that the 2 squatters I found resisted lawful inquiry and were lost in a regrettable depressurization accident before they could be removed to safety." He spread his hands. "Tragic, unavoidable, and entirely plausible, because look at this place, caretaker. Look at where you live. Who in the Corps would doubt that this tomb finally killed its keepers?" The wind screamed. And I understood all at once and all the way down that we were going to die. The broadcast hadn't saved us. It had just changed the shape of the lie they'd tell about it. I looked at Tavin. He didn't look scared anymore. He looked, and this is the thing I can't get past, even now, he looked satisfied. Like the adjutant had just walked exactly where Tavin wanted him to walk. "Plausible," Tavin said. "Yeah, that would have worked great." He nodded slowly. "Except for one thing." "And what is that?" "You came inside the line." I didn't know what he meant. The adjutant didn't either. I could see it. That tiny flicker of not knowing, on a face that I don't think had been uncertain about anything in 1,000 years. "Ein," Tavin said, and he pointed down, at the landing pad, at the painted markings on the deck, faded but still there, a wide ring of old yellow paint that circled the whole pad. I'd walked across that ring 1,000 times and never once thought about it. 200 years ago, when this port was chartered, the founders set a perimeter. Everything inside that ring is port ground, neutral ground, conquered ground. And the charter doesn't just say the signatories swore to defend it. He looked up. It says any armed incursion across that perimeter, by any power, triggers the sentinel. The adjutant went very still. "There is no sentinel," he said. "We surveyed this facility before approach. Its weapons grid has been dead for 40 years. Its defensive systems are corroded scrap. You have nothing, caretaker. Nothing." "You surveyed the weapons grid," Tavin agreed. "Sure, that's been dead a long time. I let it die. Cost too much to keep up, and what was I going to shoot at? Freighters." He shook his head. "But the Sentinel was never a gun, adjutant. The founders weren't stupid. They knew a port at the edge of the dark couldn't outshoot a real navy, so they didn't build a weapon. They built a witness that can't be silenced." He reached into his coat. Every soldier's weapon snapped up at once. 12 barrels, all on him, that liquid speed, faster than I could even flinch. Tavin moved slow, real slow. He pulled out a small black box, old, worn smooth on the corners from years, in his pocket. "Easy," he said to the soldiers, almost gentle. "It's not a gun. I'm too old to draw faster than you anyway." He held it up. "This is the Sentinel trigger," he said. "Independent power. Independent transmitter, buried under 50 meters of bedrock where your survey couldn't see it, with its own reactor that I have personally kept fueled every single year for the last 30 years. He turned it in his fingers. "When this transmits, it doesn't fire anything. It sends one signal. A single authenticated burst, on the founder's own frequency, carrying the charter codes and the live sensor record of everything happening on this pad. Every face, every weapon, every word, straight to the deep relays, the old ones. The ones the founders seeded across 40 systems before any of your modern borders existed. Relays that nobody can jam because nobody remembers they're there. He looked the adjutant dead in his colorless eyes. You can kill us. You can rewrite the record. But you cannot rewrite that. The second you crossed the line, the only question left was whether the truth got out before or after you murdered 2 people on it. He held up the box. It already went out, he said. I triggered it when you set foot on the pad. I have replayed that moment 1,000 times. The adjutant's face, the way it changed. Not fear, I don't think that creature was capable of fear, not the way we are, but calculation. Furious, racing calculation. I could practically hear it. He was a being who had spent his entire long life 2 or 3 moves ahead of everyone around him, and an old human caretaker on a dead rock had just put him in check. You are bluffing, he said, but there was a crack in it now, a thin one. Maybe, Tavin said. You want to bet 11 warships and your whole quiet little expansion on maybe, because here's what happens if I'm not bluffing. In about 3 hours, that signal hits the first relay, and it doesn't go to one council. It goes to all of them, every signatory of the Concord of 40 living and successor, the Compact, the Free Worlds, the Drennan, 30 more. And it tells every one of them the exact same thing at the exact same time in language they all swore an oath to 2 centuries ago. He leaned in. It tells them the Senari are coming back, out of the core, across the old lines, taking the edges one quiet rock at a time. It tells them you started here, and it shows them your face doing it. The adjutant said nothing. You think the core is going to ignore that, Tavin pressed. You think the Compact wants the Senari Dominion expanding into the frontier. You think the Drennan do. They hate each other, those powers. They've been at each other's throats for 100 years. But the one thing that brings them all to the table is somebody old and hungry coming out of the deep core to eat the galaxy from the edges in. He shook his head slowly. You didn't come here to take a port, adjutant. You came here to take a test. You wanted to know if anybody was watching the edges. And now you've got your answer. Everybody's watching. Everybody. And it's your face they're watching. The wind died down for a second. Just a moment of stillness. And in that stillness I heard the adjutant breathe, a long, slow, hissing breath like something deflating. You have done a great deal of damage, he said quietly, with a single old man and a buried box. That's the thing about us, Tavin said. We're not strong, we're not fast, we don't have your years or your ships, but we are stubborn, adjutant. We hold on. We keep the lights on in the grave for 50 years on the off chance somebody comes through the door. And when they finally do, he held up the black box one last time, we're ready. Now, I have to back up here because there's something I didn't understand at the time, and you won't either unless I tell you. The green levers. You remember, first thing Tavin ever said to me, don't touch the green levers. There were 4 of them in a locked panel in the deepest part of the working sector, down where the air was thinnest and the wind couldn't reach. I'd asked him about them maybe twice over the months. Both times he just said they were old emergency systems, decommissioned, dangerous, leave them alone. And I had. You didn't argue with Tavin about things like that. What I didn't know, what he'd never told me, was that the green levers weren't decommissioned at all. They were the manual overrides for the port's atmospheric venting system. Every sealed section of Hollow Reach, all those dead dark corridors I hated, all that cold airless space could be repressurized from those levers, filled with air, brought back to life. But more than that, the venting system could also work in reverse. It could pull the air out of any section in the working sector fast and hard in an emergency, a blowout, a controlled depressurization to fight a fire or flush a contaminant, or to kill everyone in a room in about 90 seconds. Tavin had spent 30 years keeping those levers working, the same way he kept the landing lights working and the Sentinel fueled and the charter codes alive, not because he ever planned to use them, but because a port's a promise and part of the promise was, I will be ready. I'm telling you this now because of what happened next. The adjutant straightened up. Whatever calculation he'd been running. He'd finished it. I watched the decision settle over him like a cold front. And when he spoke, his voice had changed, all the silk gone out of it, leaving just the iron underneath. "You are correct, caretaker," he said. "The signal cannot be unsent, the record cannot be unwritten. You have ensured that my presence here will be known." He nodded slowly. "But you have made one final error, and it is the same error your species always makes. You believe that because you have made my crime visible, you have made it unprofitable. You have not. You have only made it urgent." He gestured, and his soldiers spread out. "If the core is going to react regardless," he said, "then I have no reason for restraint. None. Whether I leave this port quietly or burn it to slag, the consequence is identical. The council convenes, the powers posture, the long, slow game begins. So." He looked at the dark windows, the silent halls, the whole dead port that Tavin had kept alive for 30 years. "I will take what I came for. And I will make of this place an example, so that the next forgotten rock thinks very hard before it reaches back 200 years to spit in my face." He turned those colorless eyes on us. "You wanted to be witnessed, old man. Then be witnessed. The galaxy will watch the Senari arrive, and the very first thing it will see us do is reduce Hollow Reach and its clever caretaker to dust. That is also a record, and it speaks more loudly than any charter." He raised one long hand. "Take them inside," he told his soldiers. "I want them to see what becomes of their port before they die in it." And the soldiers came for us. I want to be honest about what I did in that moment. I froze. I just locked up. Couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Two of those tall, liquid-fast soldiers came across the pad toward us, and I stood there like a post in the ground while my whole body screamed at me to run, and absolutely nothing happened. It was Tavin who moved. He grabbed my arm hard, that broken and reset grip like iron, and he yanked me sideways behind him, and he put himself between me and them. "You don't need the boy," he said to the adjutant fast and low. "He's nobody. He's a loader I hired 6 months ago. He's never even seen the Sentinel. Let him take a shuttle. You've got your example, that's me, that's the port. He doesn't change your record one bit." The adjutant paused. "How sentimental," he murmured. "You would spend your last words bargaining for a stranger." "He's not a stranger," Tavin said. "He's the next one. Somebody's got to keep the lights on after me." And the adjutant laughed, a soft, dry, awful sound like dead leaves. "After you, caretaker, there will be no port for him to keep." He flicked his fingers. "Take them both." The soldiers reached us, and Tavin shoved the black box into my hands. He did it fast, hidden, his body blocking the soldier's view for just a second, and he leaned in close to my ear, and under all the wind and the noise he said 6 words. He said, "The green levers, Section 9, run." And then he turned around, and he hit one of the soldiers in the face. It was the most ridiculous, hopeless, beautiful thing I have ever seen. A 70-year-old man in a cheap breathing mask, swinging a closed fist into the visor of a 2.5-meter Senari soldier. It did nothing. The soldier didn't even rock back. Tavin probably broke his own hand on it. But it bought a second. And a second was all he was trying to buy. "Run," he roared. And I ran. I don't remember deciding to. My body just did it, finally, all that frozen panic snapping forward into pure motion. I ran for the airlock at the edge of the pad. The box clutched against my chest, and behind me I heard a sound I will hear until the day I die, the wet, heavy, final sound of a Senari weapon firing, and Tavin Marsh not making any sound at all after it. I didn't look back. He told me not to look back, not in words, but I knew. Looking back was for after. Right now there was only Section 9 and the green levers and the door slamming shut behind me as I threw myself into the dark working corridors of the port that he had just died to keep. The thing about Hollow Reach was that I knew it. Not the way Tavin knew it, nobody knew it like Tavin, but 6 months of hauling cargo and walking gauges and getting lost in the dark had put the bones of that place into my body. I knew which corridors connected. I knew which doors stuck. I knew the shortcut through the old cargo sorting hall that cut 3 minutes off the run to the deep sector. The Sonari didn't know any of that. I heard them behind me, that liquid speed, faster than any human could ever move, gaining on me down the long main corridors. But every time they gained, I'd cut sideways, through a maintenance hatch, down a service ladder, across a catwalk so old it groaned under my weight, and they'd lose me. They were faster, but they were strangers in the dark, and I was 19 and terrified and home. I made it to Section 9. It was the deep working sector where the air was thinnest, where the wind couldn't reach. The locked panel was there just like always, 4 green levers behind a sheet of cracked plastic. I smashed the plastic with the black box. I put my hands on the levers. And then I stopped. Because I understood what they did. I understood, finally, why Tavan had spent 30 years keeping them working. Why he told me to run here. Because the venting system could pull the air out of any section of the working port, fast and hard, including the main concourse and the landing pad airlocks, where, on the camera feed flickering on the panel above me, I could see 11 Sonari soldiers and 1 ancient adjutant standing on port ground, inside the airlock seals, in a section I controlled. If I pulled the levers, I could blow the atmosphere out of that whole section in 90 seconds. I could kill all of them. And I could kill myself too, probably, if the seals between Section 9 and the rest didn't hold. And I had no idea if they'd hold. Tavan would have known. Tavan had known everything. But Tavan was dead on the landing pad, and there was nobody left to ask. My hands shook on the levers. And the panel comm crackled, and the adjutant's voice came through, calm again, silk again, filling the whole dark deep sector. "Boy," he said, "I know what you're standing in front of. We found the venting schematics in the old man's records. Clever again, they were a clever species, your founders. But listen to me carefully. If you pull those levers, the seals will not hold. Section 9 is 2 centuries old. You will die with us. And the record, the precious record your caretaker died for, will show the galaxy not a brave defense, but a frightened child committing murder-suicide in a tomb." A pause. "Is that the promise you wish to keep? Is that how you honor him?" I stood there, in the dark, hands on the levers, my dead friend's blood barely cold on the pad above me, and the oldest, smoothest, cruelest voice in the galaxy was telling me to let go. And I almost did. But here's the thing he didn't know. Here's the thing that none of them knew. Because they'd surveyed our weapons grid and read our schematics and calculated everything, except the one thing that actually mattered. I didn't pull the levers to kill them. I pulled the green levers to bring the port back to life. Because that's what those 4 levers really did, all of them together. Not just vent, repressurize, every dead, dark, airless section of Hollow Reach, the thousands of meters of corridor that had been cold and empty for 50 years, all of it could be flooded with air and light and power from those 4 levers at once. Tavan kept the venting working, sure, but he kept the whole system working, both directions, and the master sequence, all 4 full open, didn't kill anything. It woke the whole station up. I didn't fully know that's what I was doing. I want to be honest. In that moment, I wasn't thinking it through like a plan. I was thinking about Tavan's voice, a port's a promise, and I was thinking I am not going to be the thing that lets the lights go out. And I grabbed all 4 green levers and I threw them open at once, because if I was going to die in that grave, I wanted to die with the place awake. And Hollow Reach came alive. You have to understand what 50 years of sealed, dead station coming back online all at once sounds like, feels like. It started as a groan, deep in the bones of the place, then a rush, a great roaring rush of air pouring into corridors that hadn't breathed in half a century, slamming through the ducts, filling the dark. The lights came up section by section, racing away down the corridors in long chains, white and gold and flickering, 200 years of bulbs sputtering awake. The scrubbers everywhere thundered to life. The doors, every sealed bulkhead. Every locked section, every dead airlock cycled and opened, because the master sequence was an all clear and opened the port. A "we are receiving," and the whole station obeyed, including the doors around the scenario. Up on the camera feed I watched it happen. The adjutant and his soldiers, standing in what they thought was a sealed dead section, and suddenly every door around them blew open, and air roared through, and lights crashed on, and alarms that hadn't sounded in 50 years began to wail. And for one beautiful moment the most ancient power in the galaxy flinched, 12 liquid-fast soldiers spinning, weapons up, at a port that had just sat up out of its own grave around them. And then the comms opened. Not our comms, the port's comms. The master sequence didn't just open the doors, it rearmed the Founder's systems. The old automated hailing array, the welcome array. 200 years ago, when this place was alive, every ship that landed got the same greeting, broadcast in 40 languages across the whole station, and that greeting had been sitting dead in the system all this time, and now it was awake and it played. It boomed through every corridor of Hollow Reach, loud enough to shake the dust off the ceilings. It said, "Welcome to Hollow Reach Neutral Port, chartered under the Concord of 40. You are now under the protection of the Concord. All weapons must be secured. All visitors are guests. May your journey end safely, and may you find here whatever you have lost. The port keeps the promise." 40 languages, over and over, filling the whole dead station with the voices of the Founders, with 200 years of welcome, with the promise Tavin had spent his life keeping. And up on the camera I saw the adjutant Vosk Salone standing in the middle of it, in the light, in the noise, in the living port. And I swear on Tavin's name, for just a second, the oldest creature I have ever seen looked lost. But it didn't last. It couldn't. He was still an adjutant of the Senari Dominion, with 11 warships overhead and 12 soldiers at his side, and a repressurized station and a recorded welcome message: "Do not, by themselves, stop a fleet." The adjutant recovered faster than I wanted him to. His voice came back over the comm, and the silk was gone for good now, replaced by something flat and final and furious. "Find the boy," he said. "Find him and bring him to me alive. And then," a pause, and when he spoke again it was very quiet, "then bring this place down, all of it. Wake or sleep, light or dark, I do not care. I will not be made a fool of by a tomb." And the soldiers came into the deep sector after me. But now the port was awake, and the doors did what I told them. I'd never thought of myself as clever. Tavin was the clever one. I was the loader, the kid who didn't touch the green levers. But the thing about a station you've lived in for 6 months, that you've just brought back to life with your own 2 hands, is that you understand it in your hands and your feet, even when your head is too scared to think. And the master sequence had given me the doors. There was a control sub-panel right there in Section 9, the local one, the one Tavin used for maintenance. With the master sequence active and the whole port awake, I could see the Senari. Every camera in the station was live now. I could see all 12 soldiers spreading out through the corridors, hunting me, and I could see every bulkhead between them and me. So I started closing doors. Not on them, I wasn't fast enough, and Tavin had told me the seals wouldn't hold for a kill, and I believed him. But around them, ahead of them. I closed the door at the end of the corridor a soldier was running down, and watched him skid to a stop. I opened a side passage that led him 3 minutes the wrong way. I sealed the cargo hall behind 2 of them and rerouted them down toward the old market wing, away from me, into the deepest, oldest part of the port where even I got lost. I turned Hollow Reach into a maze, and I was the only one who knew the way out of it. I led them in circles for what felt like hours but was probably 20 minutes, long enough for the thing I was really waiting for. Because here's what I understood. Crouched in that control sub-panel in the deep dark with my dead friend's blood on the pad above me, and the whole port roaring its welcome around me. The Sentinel signal had gone out 3 hours ago, and 3 hours was just enough time to reach the first relay. And I had no idea If anybody out there in the whole black galaxy was going to answer a 200-year-old call from a port everyone had forgotten. Tavin had said it himself. I don't expect most of you to answer. I know what we are out here. The whole plan, the whole brave, hopeless, beautiful plan came down to one impossible bet. That somewhere in some council chamber, somebody would hear Hollow Reach's call and come. I didn't think anybody would. I led the soldiers in circles anyway, because it was the only thing left to do, because a port's a promise and the promise was hold on, hold on, hold on as long as you can. And then the long-range scope, which was awake now too, alive again like everything else, flickered. Just once. A little flash, way out at the edge of range. Then gone. I stared at it. The green line swept around. And when it came back, the edge of the scope was full of contacts. Dozens of them. Coming in fast. And this time, every single one of them was broadcasting a transponder, loud and proud and bright, on the Founder's own frequency, the frequency that hadn't carried a signal in 50 years. Somebody had answered.